And just like we've done before, we're going to create new, go to print, find the tabloid 11 by 17. Remember, you could always look it up here, or you could just type in 11 by 17. Let's make it horizontal or landscape style. Once again, we wanted 300. But we want to work large and use the best tools so that when we shrink it down, if needed, we don't see any seams. And we're just going to leave it here as an RGB color scheme. All I really have to do at the top here, though, and I'm just going to do this, last name, I'll call this, we'll start with the restoration. And I'll just call this last name restoration just to get initial name there. That gets us to our beginning artboard canvas, which is just a blank white canvas. We can even double check our workspace and reset it. I like to expand my tools, and I can go ahead now and just temporarily just start by saving this in the appropriate folder.
What was the height and width?
11 by 17 inches. If you choose the tabloid, tabloid is automatically 11 by 17. If you don't see inches when you create new, you can, it might say pixels per inch, dots per inch, or centimeters. You just switch to inches and it shows you 11 by 17. So all I'm doing here, without even creating anything yet, I'm just going to save this to save as a PSD. Okay, I've already got a bunch here. Let me maybe give this a name. I'll say. And I just want to save this just to get the file saved so that I don't forget about it later on, or I could save in different generations, right? Version 1, version A, version B. And all I have to do now to save in the future, if you ever get used to this, you see save is simply a Control S. So I can hit Control S on the keyboard to save and keep working. And that's really just good practice. It's something to remember when you're doing this. All right, so let's start first with researching and finding images that we need. So we're starting with the restoration. So again, if you don't have access to a photo yourself, lots of people have damaged photos in their house. It could be an old picture of grandpa. It could be, an uncle. It could be a recent photo that was printed and got torn or damaged or something like that. But if you do a Google image search, you see there's plenty of examples here to play with, whether they be just damaged, ripped, torn, whatever. I could even type in torn photos here. I can say stained photos. Now, when we're doing this, though, one of the good things to always remember, because remember, we want to work large. Most of these photos have been saved for the web, which means they have been, minimized in their size. They have been compressed, because the web does not need large photos. So when we're looking for photos, and this is even for like resource photos for the second part of the assignment, it's kind of just good to go to Tool, Size, and choose Large. Because at least these now, and you can see if I click on one, it's going to say here 1128 by 1200. So a general rule when you're dealing with photos that approximately you don't really want to go smaller than 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. Because even here, if I want to, I can go to my properties here. And, well, I guess it doesn't show me, it shows me inches of my properties. But if I were to go to the image size here, you can see that an 11 by 17 in inches at 300 dots per inch is actually 5,100 pixels by 3,300 pixels at 300 resolution. So it's actually bigger than what it says here. So, and remember, resolution of 300 means it's already nearly 4 times the size of something that would be 72 resolution. So this is why when we search, we want something big, okay? And you can see if I click on these, by the way, you can see that's actually a YouTube video. This one's 1280 by 720. Click on this one says 1280 by 833. But in the long run here, what we're doing is we're just finding damaged photos. Now, if you were to find one here that's already been restored, just remember and be aware that when you work on this, you're going to want to delete that which has already been restored. And you see it, and this one has a before and after where it's been corrected. It's been color converted to a true black and white with good contrast of pure black and pure white. It's just a better, more modern version of the photo. But also be aware that if you try to turn this in as your assignment, all I have to do is do a Google reverse image search, and it will show me whether or not you just copied and pasted something that already existed. So see here, lots of images here. Now this one's 7/10/1194. It's not bad. And again, you can open that in a new tab, save as your image, and then get it into your folder. Once again, though, remember, you want to work from your desktop if possible. Here I have a folder already built for all my assignments. I'll also, by the way, get into these Photoshop brushes today, because when we're doing, like, say, an image manipulation and you need something that's like a dynamic effect, like smoke, fire, clouds, water, splash, anything like that, it's really difficult to cut stuff like that out of a photo and use it. So there's actually Photoshop brushes that are already been built that you can download for free, and you can paint different effects like that using just a Photoshop brush. So here I am, assignment 2, and you can see I have actually already got damaged photo loaded up in here. I probably got a couple of them here, right? And you just want to put your contents in here so you can actually get them going. Okay, so let's go back to our image now, and I'm going to show you why we don't just open and work. Okay, this is the one I just showed you. So I'm going to do it wrong first, right? Here I have opened this photo. And if I zoom in and I need to make a correction, right? If I zoom on in here and I get to a point where I need to make a correction, right? Maybe it's I'll just use a paintbrush here. And I get to a point where 1 pixel, you can see I can paint pixel by pixel, but you really don't want to work at a 1 pixel level, because you can see what it does. It doesn't give you a smooth line. It gives you a jagged line, which, yeah, if you zoom out, you don't really notice. But more importantly, that if I then were to copy this and paste it into my 1117, you can see just how small it is. So we don't want to really work by opening an image. This is why we go File, New, and we do it that way. This is why we use the practice of File, Place Embedded. And remember, you don't want Place Linked, because Place Linked will not include the placed image because it's simply linked to a folder. You want to embed it. Okay, and I wasn't going to do that, guy. This guy was going to do it. I'm going to show you this. Right? So if you see, when you place the image, it places it in an aspect ratio to fit the file that you have already created. Now, remember when we place embedded, though, it places it with this strange little icon here under the layer, which means it is a smart object. It will not let me work on it. See, this smart object must be rasterized before proceeding. Well, if I hit OK, it's going to rasterize it. Or I can go to Layer, Smart Object, and Rasterize. And now I've lost that little icon there, which means I'm ready to work. Now, a simple way of removing or keep using what I want and what I don't want. Like I said, this one, somebody already restored it. I just want the damaged image. So I'm just going to put a box selection around what I want. And I can either do a select, invert, delete, or I'm just going to do a cut and a paste. And that will allow me now to select the original one, which I don't want. It's already been done, and trash it. Now I have the before. Let me just do a quick little Control T, which is the transform tool, so I can just minimize it a little bit. Active. And then I'm going to hold my Alt and just slide it over. And that is the quickest way to copy a layer. Okay? it created and copied the layer, and that was simply holding the Alt key, selecting it, and dragging it. So now I can take my before, lock it. I can even come up here now really quickly, grab the T tool, and just say before, tab, 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 tab. Right, just at the beginnings of my information here of what I'm doing. And even that I can lock, so I don't have to accidentally touch that. And now I'm ready to work on my image over here on the right. Now, first things first, we're gonna see if I zoom in here, there's a lot of weird noise going on here. It's not just noise by being an old photo that's probably scanned, but also there is what's called voxeling, okay? And this is part of the compression process inside of a JPEG. So remember, when you compress for a JPEG format, you're losing some data, you're losing some color, and what it's doing is it's simplifying the image. I don't know if you can see it here, but I'll just put a box around it here. But there is this green box kind of shape right about there. Okay, and you can see there's another one here, like there. There's another one over here, and they're typically greens or they're purples or something like that. And what it's doing is that's just its way of simplifying the data to make a smaller JPEG image. The problem is that it's distorted and it's given us this weird patterning. Well, that's called a JPEG artifact. And when you're working with anything that has been saved or converted to a JPEG, anything on the web, any photo that you pull off your phone, if it's not a RAW file, it's going to have this voxing, this kind of squareness. I'll show you when we work on the next image, the photo restoration, why this is important to be aware of. It's because that is patterning that you don't want if you're going to use now a high quality version and restore it. So this patterning here, let me focus on that one that was really obvious. I think there's one right here. You can see this line of color where it's green and purple on the other side. So what we need to do is we need to filter the noise that is evident in the image. Well, then we also need to take away the JPEG artifact. Here's another line you can see right here. I don't know if you can see that. See this line that follows right down there, this right-hand side. And again, that's just when we zoom in, you see the simplification. So to correct this, we have first thing we do to a JPEG is filter, noise, reduce noise. Now it'll load it up. Let me make sure I've got the right one here. There we go.
Did you place embedded to put the photo in?
Yes.
Because when I did it, it was like really low quality and small, even though I did the same thing as you.
Well, again, if you place embedded, it should fit the size of the canvas, the new artboard you've created. Now, I might have a setting on mine that's a little different to fit. I mean, that could be something, like I said, if you're in the, just do this really quick. Let's just check out what this place embedded option is.
That's the one I used.
Yeah, see mine. Okay. So yeah, what that's telling us there is that this image that we grabbed off the internet is just that small. You see that?
Yeah.
Now again, you can work with that and you can scale it up to fit,
Yeah, it was really low quality though.
But you're going to have, that's where, again, the image that you work with, if it's low quality, there's not much you can do with it if it's small. That's why when you do your search here, if I click on this guy, let's see here, what's it say? Now this says 1128 by 1200, but honestly, if I take and say any size here, there's probably another version of him that is smaller. Remember, there's more than one image, see, out there than, see, there's more than one version of that version. So there might be just a smaller version. That's a weird one. I mean, it can even be something in the file itself that is protecting it. Like if I was to inspect it or check out the file, that is actually saying, because you can actually save certain files like JPEGs and protect them so that they are, when you save them, they automatically are the smaller version of themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, because you're going to see that sometimes where if I go and just right click and save image as, it'll be the smaller version. Or if I open image in another tab, it'll actually say the full size. That's where, yes, that's where it's almost better sometimes to let it load, open it in another tab, and then save it from there. Okay. You're going to see that happen with a lot of things that it's like, hey, I'm still loading, so I'm just going to give you this thumbnail instead of giving you the actual full size of the image. So yeah, that does happen.
Let me try that one out.
All right, so let me zoom in on here and show you this noise reduction and JPEG artifact. Like I say, I can find any spot I want here. You can even see him on his face here. So that's a filter, noise reduction, or reduce noise. Now I'm going to zoom in so we can actually see this noise reduction happen. And again, you can almost see this. Let me turn off my preview now. The preview is off. Let me turn off JPEG. Okay. So when I'm in here, you can kind of see where this, see there's a line going right down there. The first thing I'm going to do is turn on my preview. And this is where we've got some of these noise reducers here. Now, strength. Now, again, you can see, watch the quality here change when I just take away this. And it kind of softens and blurs it. See that? So it's blurring some of the noise. Okay, we could even come here and reduce, preserve details, reduce color noise, which is kind of important, right? Because this is a single color, his skin, yet it's giving us greens and purples. Almost looks like an oil painting, right? Strokes, color. There's also a sharpen detail function here. But most important is this down here. Look at it, remove JPEG artifact. So what it's going to do, it's going to look at JPEG's compression and simplification of the pixels and remove it. So if I hit that, it's going to clean this up. Now it takes a little bit of time to actually see that happen because it's having to completely remove all that voxeling that's there. Then we hit OK. And so if you look here at his skin, let me just go undo. Just watch this shift and change. Okay, I undid it. You see how there's bigger blocks of purple here? Let me go back and redo. And you see how it washes a lot of that out. So just by doing that simple exercise of reducing noise, it just gives us a better quality image to start to work with. Now, next, I can start to figure out what do I want to do next to restore this. Some people will say, oh no, let's convert it to black and white. That should not be done first. That actually should be done last because a lot of the correction here is going to be with the existing pixels. If I convert it to black and white, now I'm having to just work with less color, right? Just grayscale, which means I can't match correction as well. So we're going to leave it in its colored RGB value here. This, I guess it's a sepia, or it's, it had a term back in the day, but this kind of brownish tone. All right. The first restoration tool we're going to use is this little Band-Aid, okay, next to the eyedropper, called the Spot Healing Brush Tool. And you can see it again, removes marks and blemishes. This is the Pimple Remover. And what it's doing here, you can see by the size. So let me just make this large for a second so we can see. And let me move this down so we can even see it over the dark color. So you see the roundness of my brush. So what the Spot Healing Brush does is it takes information from the outer circle and it pulls those pixels towards the center. That's why I said it's the very popular tool for, like I say, removing, pimples and stuff like that, zits, but any marks. So what we do is you almost want it to be soft, and I hover over a dot that doesn't need to be there, like this white dot now, and I simply just click on it. And you see it has washed it out. You almost see the little black brush there for a second as it pulls it in. Okay. Now, it works great for individual little dots. See this? But you have to be careful with this when it comes to actually long areas. Now, see, that worked really good, but you notice it didn't take away this one. Because remember, it's trying to pull from all the way around the circle. So the fact that it still has white means it's pulling the white back in. So let me show you here. Let me drag across this here. That actually worked pretty well. But you see, it doesn't quite do it all. And we don't want to do this when we're crossing over different color values. See how it goes dark brown, light brown, very dark brown, light brown, because that's going to just blend all those colors in. And you can almost see that like a scar. See that? It looks like a scar. It's evident as a scar. So we're not going to use that on these big, long scars. And by the way, this is also another reason why we don't convert to or do a level adjustment of true black and white like we did, last week with the initial sketch, is because the whitest thing in this image is the scratch itself. So we don't want to color correct or do a level adjustment to this image because, number one, there's no true blacks. It's just dark brown, and the whitest of white is the errors we want to remove. Okay, so I'm just going to bounce around here really quickly here. And again, I'm actually going to find that this is make it a little harder, a little too soft right now. Okay, and I'm just going to start coming around here and looking for some areas to heal. You're going to find that this tool works best when you do small little cleanups. So small little bits of cleanup. And again, I'm not going to worry about any edges just yet. Small little clicks, small little clicks. Now, we get into big patches like this tool is not going to work because it's trying to, again, pull color from all sides. And just using a bigger brush for this healing spot brush is not going to be the answer. So, like I say, dots and small errors work, but not the larger ones. Especially, like I say, where you have a transition of color value here, because it doesn't know where to pull the outside colors to correct the inner error. So I'm just doing a lot of little spot healing. Look at them all. Okay, I'm not going to worry about this area on his chin here because, again, you can see if I'm pulling color from the outer circle, it's going to pull it incorrectly. Again, we're restoring, we're not distorting. I don't want to distort the image because it's not about making it unrecognizable. And I'm not overdoing this. I'm not just painting with this spot cleaning brush. I'm just popping it around. There, you can almost see here how I'm doing. See how it doesn't work really on that scratch. Just popping around here and finding the obvious dots. So just click and remove. See, bang. It actually will work in the hair, right? Because there's enough around it. And again, I'm not making long brush strokes because that will literally, remember, we're pulling the pixels around this brush towards the center. If I were to go make a big long one like that, it's now going to look like a blurry, smudgy area there. Okay, so I'm going to undo that. Got a few more little spots to clean up. So again, this is what all the magazine and the models and the photographers use for, when they, remove freckles or wrinkles, in faces or blemishes or spots. And a lot of students I have are like, oh my God, I'm going to use that on every photo I have because I can then make, I use it all the time for, like I say, if I do wedding photos or something like that, it could be something like a strange, glare or smudge or hot spot or something like that. All right, looks like this is enough done. A few more down here. These smaller ones work. All right.
Want to see mine? Just
All right. So that is, again, the spot healing brush. Now, there are other brushes under, like the healing brush tool. There's, which you can see here. You Alt-click to define a source. So this needs an Alt-click. And I don't know if you can see it, but it gives me a little targeting device. So wherever I click with holding in the Alt key, it will paint that over there. Okay. Again, not all, and you see it blends it. There's also a patch tool, which allows me to draw a patch, which then I can, you see, tell it to be something else. Do that. There's also the content aware move tool. And you see what that does with a soft feathery edge. And finally, there's even a red eye tool. So remember, the stuff that you have on your phone, guys, is built off of Photoshop. So a lot of these tools have been evolved into other apps that you can find. All right. The other tool I'm going to use for restoration, which is very important, is the one right beneath the spot healing brush, which is the clone stamp. And if let's see, you can give me my preview of it. Yes, no, maybe. There it is, okay? And you see the clone stamp example here. It works very similar to the select healing brush that you actually Alt-click target to then spread it to another area. So this is like borrowing textures. So I'm going to give it some size here, give it a little bit of feather. Okay, so let's start over here in this large rip scratch in his ear. So this is the clone stamp. So again, I'm going to Alt-click a target. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to take this section over here and put it over there. I'm going to clone it. So I'm going to click to the left of it, Alt-click, and now you see wherever I take this, it's going to paint that value. And you see the little crosshair is telling me where I put that. Now, I like to sometimes use a little less opacity on this, so it's putting it down, but not over the top. Okay, so watch this now, right? I've got a tear here in the ear. So if I click down below here where I get that complex color value, Alt-click, and I move it up, all I got to do here now is just a single click, and I've healed that area. Go to his chin, right here. Alt-click, actually move it over a little bit, Alt-click, and one click. Okay, let's look at his jacket here. So again, I've got this edge of the jacket right before the tear, right here just above it, Alt-click, and drag the cursor over. Okay. I'm going to use then down below the bottom part here. Alt click to patch that in. And now you can actually see why I'm using a little less opacity, so I can actually do a couple clicks of that and not putting it down really thick. Let's take this selection right here, Alt click. Okay. Even the tie, watch this. I'll Alt click the tie here. Okay. And I'm just clicking to cover up that patch. And look how it's even picking up the pattern. Believe it or not, if you guys happen to be like, say, 3D artists or game artists, when it comes to working with a lot of creating what's called tileable textures, this is a technique of blending textures so that they can be tileable. So they tile to infinity. Get a little messed up there. Let's see here. Let's grab this here. You see, it's got limitations. If you run out of space, again, all I'm trying to do is just clean it up by taking selection areas. Now, there you can clearly see where it looks like I repaired it. To fix that, I'll go with a large one. Okay. And again, less opacity. Take a sample here, and I'll just give it a couple small clicks to blend it back out. Okay. Small again, opacity. And this is why I said it's a really quick fix here. So again, I'm going to select from the upper, just on top of this edge, Alt click to then slide down, and then I can literally correct and blend that in. Here again, I'm going to select slightly below it. A little too small of this. Okay. Alt click underneath it. And you see what it's doing. It's literally sampling from just below it to then fill that in. And again, if you get too much patterning there, it's simply just, and so it's actually clone stamping even the noise and the grain of the old photo. I'm gonna move that up to full opacity now, because what about edges? Okay, okay, so I'm gonna Alt click right on the edge of the canvas, or on the edge of the image. And now I can slide it on down now and really quickly patch that up. Click, get that edge, and slide it in. Okay, this is a good reason here now, because I've got this whole corner to deal with. Okay, that's what I'm going to do here now. I'm going to mask off using a selection tool, that whole corner, which means only what's inside is activated, right, or is selected. So when I go and use this clone here, I'll go with a large one now, larger. I can select right here in the middle, and you see it will not paint outside of what I have selected there. And that's just a quick way of finishing off entire corners without having to, trim things off, although I typically trim these off or put a black border on them anyways, all right? So again, right here in the center, I'll Alt click, ping, Alt click, click, and clean it up. And this can come in really handy when you have a really complicated area here, right? Because this is completely missing. It's torn. So I'm going to mask it off with a square. Watch now. I'm now going to use the lasso tool with a little bit of feather and reduce or subtract. And I'm going to subtract right along his jacket here. Okay. And now that has subtracted it, which means when I go and use my clone stamp tool now inside of here, I don't have to go inside that border, inside the jacket. Here. Now, once again, you could say, yeah, well, that looks like crap. You've got a clear division, larger, less opacity, pick a value. So it's just like painting or something like that. I'm just putting down a thinner layer of that to blend it out. Now you can still see it there a little bit. Believe it or not, that can even be a job for spot tool. So clone, smaller, increase the capacity. All right, so I could keep going here with this clone stamp tool. See? Again, I got a little bit of patterning. Let's get the edge of this jacket here. Larger, less opacity, thick. Just put a few clicks here to blend it out. One more little corner here. And the stabs there. That's okay. You can always come back and trim it off. Like I said, I'm going to put this in a black frame anyways, or a white frame, just to make it look more modern. All right. Let's see what's up. So not a lot of, I'm really only focusing right now on just a few simple tools. It's going really quickly. You can see my technique of putting some down there, getting a larger, less opacity here. Go ahead and deselect. And because it's just lower opacity, it just kind of covers it up. There. All right. So I've pretty much cleaned up all the major tears and snags, right? There's some evidence of what I've done, right? I'll clean that up in a second here when I color correct it. One thing I have left here is his eye. And I've had to do this many, many a time in a restoration process where the tear goes through a body part, a face, an eye, a mouth, and there you just can't fix it because there's just too much information that's missing, right? Too much detail. Now, I've used body parts from other people before. I've used, just like a model on a cover of a magazine, the editors or photo people might actually use a stunt body. You've probably heard of that. So they take the actress's head and they put it on a totally different person's body and blend it and make it work. Matching skin tone, all that. This is an example here that's really not that bad. I could probably fix this eye as is, but I'm actually going to borrow this other eye to get the detail here that I'm looking for. And what I'm going to do is use my little lasso. Now I've got some feather on here already, and I'm just going to kind of match out the inner part of this eye here. And I'm just going to Control C, copy, Control Command V, paste. You get a copy of that eye. I can then do a transform flip horizontally. And I'm going to use a little less opacity here to make it a little see-through so that I can line up the existing eye with his new eye patch. Something like that. Now, the problem, of course, is the shadow is on the left side of his face, not his right. And it looks like it's. So I'm going to do a quick little adjustment of the levels to try to get it to match the value of what his face is over there. Now, again, that's going to be the middle gray value. That's going to be a little more on the dark, like that. Now, because I've done that, it's got too much saturation. So I'll go hue saturation and back that off. Like so. Then I'm just going to use an eraser. Large, soft, that's too much. Okay, and opacity half. And I'm just going to come here and just eliminate that sharp edge. Okay, just start to blend it in a little bit. One thing that's missing, though, on this eye is the hotspot needs to be over here. The only thing that's wrong with this eye is because I flipped it. This hotspot should be over there. So if you think about the easiest way to correct that, that would be a small clone stamp. Okay, I'll leave it 50%. Maybe I'll make it a little softer. So I want this hotspot, so I'll just click it there, to be on this side, a little more intense. And I want the upper corner of the eye, so I'll use, now you'll see what they've done though is that on this selection of the clone is only set to current layer. Now, I copied and pasted on a new layer. If I want to select through the layers, I've got to choose current and below. Now I can select the dark area of the eye here. You can see again, and I'm just going to fill that in to get that where I need it to be. This back to layer. So now I need to put this little eye layer onto the lower layer. That is a merge down. So now you see they're on the same layer. All right, so you can see in what, 30 minutes, I was able to restore it pretty much. What's remaining though is I need to do the color correction and make it look modern. So how do we do that? We're going to treat the whole layer. Okay, first I'm going to convert to black and white. Now you see there's a black and white button here, and if I do that, it's going to allow me to control how dark do I want my reds to be, how dark or light do I want my yellows to be, etc. I could also tint and hue. Okay, that's one way to convert to a black and white. Another one is just to take away the saturation. Saturation is the intensity of color. So I'm just going to back that saturation down. And finally now, what makes a good image? True black, true white. Well, we know what white looks like, and this has no true white, and it really doesn't have any true black. The last thing we need to do the final adjustment here is level, where I now have true black in my image. I have true white in my image, and I typically like to just back off, again, this input level of the middle grays and make them just be a little bit lighter. See? Now it's a modern image. And the last thing I'll do, just the heck of it, just to polish this off. I'm going to put a little box around it. Just center that box up. And then I'll use my subtract or the Alt key to get a negative symbol here. Okay, so I basically have just made it a little box there. Paint, fill. See that? And now we get a cleaned up final variation of it all. All that remains, of course, would be to put your name and necessary information. What is it? Okay. What was the purpose? Okay, what was the software? Oh, and what is the date? All the things that are important, because this is part of the portfolio process. Because if you want to start doing this online and making 40 bucks an hour, I can go right now and just type in photo restoration needed, but they want to see samples. Okay, they want to see samples, so give them the samples and explain to them, you know, hey, here's an example of some photo restoration that I've done. Now, again, I've already saved this initially, right? The file type, so all I have to do is just hit Control S at this point to save it. And then File, Save As, find the Photoshop PDF. Okay, now we can make a new folder ahead of time. Last name, your assignment 2. Make that folder so it automatically saves into that folder. Save. But remember, after we hit OK here, the pop-up, you do not want preserve Photoshop editing capabilities. You want to compress it to files, smallest file size. So it's just faster and reads faster, uploads, downloads faster, but yet it's not the highest possible quality that you're giving away. And save. Now, there's one more thing I want to talk about here, and that is colorization. What can we do in the colorization process? Okay. Well, there is a cheap, quick way to colorize if, say, the client wants it. Okay. And that's just going to make, you know, I could go ahead and lock these layers if I want to, so I don't accidentally use them. But just above the image, I'm going to make a new layer. Okay. Let me just quickly just show you. Let me just give it a color value. Whatever. I know it's going to be a little too brilliant bright here, but that's okay. So you can see if I basically were to put some skin tone down here, right? Start with some skin tone on this guy. Problem is, of course, you can see, yeah, well, that doesn't look all that great because you're simply just painting normally over top of it, right? But this is what's great. And I showed you, I believe I showed you this in last week when we were talking about painting over the sketch, is that we can change the blending mode, okay? And that will let some of the color through. So multiply, you know, screen, overlay, color only. For some reason, multiply looks the best, but that's also, remember that multiply is going to make certain color value bolder depending upon what's the color underneath. So you can see wherever I paint over the dark areas, it's obviously darker. But it's, you know, back in the day when they colorized, they would paint over the negative or they would paint over the print that was just black and white. And what they did is they used watercolor paint. What's watercolor paint? It's just more opaque. So I can back that down to get the right value. Whatever, you know, we're talking about here, you can see again, see how it lets that color through. It's letting the gray shading value lead through. And again, you can see I'm painting this pretty quick, guys. I'm not trying to be perfect with it. Some color down. I don't know, let's go with color, right? Joke grab, right? Maybe he's wearing a blue blazer. I don't know. So you can see here. I'm putting the blue down. So again, it's all going to be relative to what type of painting or blending mode to add that through, and then messing around with certain opacity levels. No? You can even go ahead and give them the classic old school, you know, Jesse James, right? Red cheeks or whatever. If it's still too much, you can always bring the opacity down to get more subtle. Or actually what works pretty cool sometimes is just to put a blur, like a Gaussian blur, over everything that you painted. So that it just kind of softens the paint even more. So just some more information, how to color, how to paint, how to get this stuff in there. And again, if you really want to get fancy, you can even say, oh yeah, well, yeah, I need, you know, let me just finish out this jacket here just to show you that we can come here and be like, yeah, well, in order to make it more believable, I need to have yellow and blue representing warm light and cool light. So my hotspots would get, you know, all the highlights would get the warm, and all the shadows would get blue. You know, in terms of how they would color the, you know, the object or the jacket you're going for. See that? And then you get even more depth and more color and all that stuff. So pretty cool stuff. You see just how quickly it is. And remember, if you actually get samples of this, if you have a portfolio of photo restorations from lots of different sources, again, damaged photos, torn photos, you know, and you know, some of the stuff you can go and then piece that together again. See that? And photo restoration needed. Well, you're not only going to, you know, you're going to find other people doing this and what they charge. Okay, here's Fiverr, affordable photo restoration service. How much does it cost to restore a photograph? I told you it's about $40 an hour. Okay, but here they're saying 50 to 70 per picture, and there's other variables there that actually control, you know, how you can do this. There's a lot of evidence here in the photo restoration. And a lot of the tools I'm using there are just, there's also tools that we're going to use when we do the photo manipulation to make photos look like they belong together, right? To make it look like it was actually a photo taken, not a bunch of, you know, cutting out, and gluing and pasting. Because you're going to be cleaning up that photo as needed. All right. Now, let's get to, whoops, leave that open. The second part of the exercise, of course, or this assignment, is creating a photo manipulation, a photo collage, a photo montage. I hate that word because South Park. But you're going to basically make an image out of a minimum, or at least 5 separate photos. Now, what's the best way to go about that? Or how do I like to work with it? Have an idea, have a concept. Surreal drawing. Okay, there. And guess what? If this right here, which is a goldfish with a splash of water inside of a light bulb, that is actually one of the most common popular tutorials on photo manipulation, because you need to find a photo of a goldfish, you need to find a photo of a light bulb, you need to find a photo of a splash or an effect of a splash, a brush, and then they put it on the beach or they put it in the forest or something like that. But anything here can be used, rather than a drawing, used by finding photos. You know, it could be body parts. This one here, You see this with the girl reading a book, dreaming with like in the trees of the seaweed with fish with birdhouses on it. Well, I've used that before as a lesson. There it is. It's not exactly that. Okay, but I was able to create a foreground, middle ground, background, sky, reflected, you know, the clouds in the ground. Think Dali, surreal, right? There's a moon, even the moon reflected. The fish are in there. So I've basically been able to, you know, erase and mask them off to make them look like they're in the image. And everything either has a warm or cool value. It's been color balanced, managed very cleanly. So, you know, I've used these before, but it's not, it's just easier to say, hey, you know what? Here, there's a little, find a house, photo of a cabin, photograph some arms, put it in a background, you know, because if I switch from surreal drawing to surreal photography, this is how they make these things, right? I mean, here, this is a famous, this guy here, and he basically stages this. So he's walking through a field, dragging a blanket, which he then blends into a winding highway. But you also have to think, in order to make a lot of this work, I'm actually going to do this really quickly here. Let's just do a new, right? Just like we did, print, tabloid size, landscape style. Go ahead and name it. Last name, photo, and the nip. So, because there's a few factors, I'm going to use this just to put these factors down here. Okay, what is the most important thing to think about when we are actually doing photo manipulation? Okay, and that. Okay, just put some text there, and I'm going to use this because if we were in the classroom right now, I would literally be doing this on the whiteboard. This is just something I always do, a little smaller. And let me just give myself a little bit of smoothing, okay, because I'm going to freehand this. All right, when it comes to creating successful photo manipulations, we have to take into account the fact that they're coming from different sources. You're putting them all together, and they have to sell as if they're real. It's kind of like the people that criticize, you know, the moon landing, or, you know, North Korea's sending photos about their new missile system, and, you know, and they make errors in the name of Photoshop. And the way I describe this is very simply, wow, it's actually not bad. What is this? This is a circle, okay? It is flat, it is two-dimensional, but it is a circle. Now, if I come here, I'm just going to quickly do this, make it a little harder, pass it down. But if I come here now and I do this, it's a basic common digital drawing exercise I do. Okay. All right, now what is this in a nutshell? It is a sphere, right? It's a shaded sphere. So the first thing, in order to make something be believable or real, right, is correct lighting, such as directional lighting, and 2, shadow cast by lighting. And that is not just value of cast shadow or the lightness or darkness. It could be the material of whatever we're dealing with. So a common mistake people make is they start cutting up photos and putting them together, and then they forget that the light of the one photo is coming left to right, and the lighting in the background is going right to left. Okay, so what do you have to do? You have to flip those around or correct that or find a better photo. Similarly, commonly, what people do is actually number 3 here. And that is, yes, this is a sphere, but the problem is the sphere is floating in midair. Okay, so now we need the cast shadow, right, on the ground, which could be easily done, right, by simply saying, oh, well, my light's coming from the right, so I need shadow. See, cast this way. And now suddenly the ball is, or the sphere, I should say, isn't floating in midair, it's on the ground. So people do this all the time. They're like, oh, I'm going to put a car and it's going to be on the beach and I'm going to put some people around it. And then they forget the fact that they need to put a shadow where the car meets the sand. They need to put a shadow underneath the feet of the people. It is the most common error in photo manipulation. If something is sitting somewhere, it's casting a shadow on the ground first. It might be even a directional shadow in the distance, right? As in the sun is further away or it's lower on the horizon. Now we're casting shadow further in the distance of where that basic light is coming from. All right. What else needs to be taken into account? Let me see if I can get this to be a right size. Okay, what else needs to be thought about then? Well, there's something as simple here as a little white dot or something like that. And what that represents, guys, is now that, okay, 4, which is what? Shiny, okay, or shine, or reflective, or it's actually called specular highlights. Suddenly we're defining the material, and that now kind of tells us that, oh, this sphere has a shininess to it. It's got a little reflectivity to it. It's actually absorbing the light to define what, but so you have to make sure that the lighting and the hot spots correlate and actually sell the idea of what you're doing. If it's shiny and we've defined that, and this is a common mistake you see in a lot of visual effects films where it'll be like, oh, Iron Man will walk by a building and they'll forget a very important thing, and that is that that building is, I don't know, mirrored or glass, and they forget to include reflections. And this is where, watch what I'm going to do here. Let's do this. Let's have some fun with this. I'm trying to do this by freehand just to see if I can do it. You see this all the time. Typically in the eyes of your anime and manga world, right? And what that is the international symbol for there, guys, is actually, that is that there's something across the room that's giving off a reflection. So when you see little things like this, it just says there's a window across the room and it's picking up the reflections of the windows. So again, you put a car on the beach. Now you cut out a car, you find a photo of a beach, you put the car on the beach, you think about the shadows cast from the direction of the sun, from the car to the sand itself that plants it, right? You got to think about, again, the car is shiny. Okay, so you're going to get specular color. That should be the color of the light or the blue of the sky. And that now leads us to, of course, reflection. So if you're cutting out a car that was a photo in a garage and you're now putting it outside on the beach, You got to make sure that in the reflection of the glass, the windows, the paint job, the chrome, all that, you see beach now, not garage. These are the things that when I see a photo manipulation, I will zoom in and I will make sure that they have this. The last thing we're going to deal with then, which is again, a very important one here. So I'll just say 6, okay? Last thing of value here that we need to pay attention to is now going to be the smooth edge quality. So it doesn't look like it was simply cut out and pasted, but this is basically the reblending of the edges. Blending of edge pixels. Blending of your edge pixels so that you get a soft transition, because when you zoom in on a photo, it's going to be a soft, it's not going to be this crisp separation of pixels between the object you're cutting out and the background. It's going to be a nice blending of that edge pixel. So this is what we're going to be working on when we're finding something. Okay, when we're working here and dealing with a manipulation. So find your concept or idea, right? Like I say, whether it's an idea you have in your head, is it a sketch? Is it just something in your mind? Do you want to just assemble it? I mean, we just had what, National Dog Day, and I literally took my little brother's head of his dog, a photo, cut it off, and I put it on an old painting, you know, of a classic painting and everything, and cleaned it up and made it all seamlessly match and everything. Shadows were cast, lighting was properly done. But there's lots of ideas here you can get for what to do. But then, of course, now what you need to do, right, is you need to now hunt down the images in order to make this work. And that is, again, where you're going to waste a lot of your time, is finding the photographs. So here, I need a banana, I need a whale, and I need a submarine on approximately that will fit together in the correct direction. Okay, banana. Remember our tools that allows us to choose things like, you know, size. I can even play with usage rights if I want to here. Just remember, guys, we're working with student projects here. So there would be no problem at all. There's no one's going to come after you if you illegally use someone else's photo, because you're actually, the intention is you're cutting it apart. You're manipulating it, okay? And you're doing it in the name of a student project. So I need a peeled banana or a peeling banana. There's one right there. It's not exactly the right angle, so I might have to make this work out. And it's on a white background, which is kind of nice, because being on a white background, I can easily separate it using, say, the magic wand tool or something like that. So let me just get rid of these. So this is where first thing we want to do perhaps is place embedded our idea, our concept, our sketch. Okay, and I've got some ideas here. I'll go with this guy right here and place it. Okay, so this is example here is, what am I going to need? Well, I'm going to lock it. I'm going to need a turtle, sea turtle, some seagulls in different poses. I'm going to need a fish net or something like that, right? A splash, some water, some sky. Well, there's about 5 images there to work with, right? But what we get into some complication here, though, is because remember, when we're searching, we're trying to find large photos. But this is where you're going to want to start to work with the individual stuff. So let's just start off with sea sky. Is this the one I want? Yeah. So I'm just going to open this. And I'm looking at the time. We're about 12:20. I also see there's a chat notification.